My name is Brad, and I'm the pastor here at Journey Church Bellevue. And again, just want to say welcome. We're glad you're here, and hopefully God's speaking to you and speaking to your heart. But Duane Wilson, he's going to share the message this morning. But before he comes up, I just want to give you a little bit of background on Duane and also just a little bit more of an idea of our goals and our vision as a church. And so, granted, we're new, and so I get this, but as of 7 weeks ago, and really before that, as Carly and I were praying through what Journey Church Bellevue would become and praying alongside with Pastor Ken and everyone in Journey Church in Fremont on what would happen, something that became clear to me that is something that from the beginning that we will focus on as a church is helping people grow into what God has placed before them. And so what does that look like? Sometimes that looks like God places us in Whirlpool, and we are faithful to show up, and we work in Whirlpool day in and day out. And day in and day out, right? And in our culture, sometimes that's painted as just drab and gray and dim. But when we're a follower of Christ, that changes things. So it's no longer going to work day in and day out and day in and day out, but it's remaining sensitive to the Spirit of God and allowing God to use us amidst that normal life, amidst whatever just sense of normalcy there is, or whatever mundane things are happening. And in a moment, God can show up through us, through His Holy Spirit, and He can change someone's trajectory of life. He can change someone's eternity. He can change someone's outlook based on that. And so we're committed to helping people grow into what God has for them. And part of what that looks like is that there's a couple of individuals that feel a call or feel a push to share God's message, to preach God's message in the context of a church service. And so Duane is one of those individuals, and there's another individual named Derek, and he's going to be speaking here in the coming future as well. But we're committed as a church to having space where people can grow into what God has for them, into ways that they can use their giftings and ways that God has placed things inside their hearts so they can grow into these areas. And so what does that mean? That means that I will not always be speaking, right? Okay, so smaller church, and sometimes the expectation is that the lead pastor is the one always speaking. Full disclosure, that will not be the case here, okay? I am committed, and hopefully I'm committed by example in the area of my vocation to come alongside others and help them take a next step in what God has for them. And I hope that you all can join me on that journey, and pun intended, I guess, but that you can help me in identifying somebody who needs to take a next step further into what God has for them. And then more than just identifying, helping people take an active role or an active step in that. That is that's part of our calling as Christ followers, to multiply Christ followers, right? Or to help other Christ followers grow in grace and knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. And so Duane has served in Journey Church for 7-8 years, and he's been a worship leader for quite a bit of that time, and he has quite an extensive background even before his involvement at Journey Church, and he's spoken at Journey Church before as well. But we met together this week and went through some of the message for this morning, and so I know that Duane's heart has been poured into this, and he's put a lot of thought and a lot of intentionality and prayer into this. So if you would just lean in and be attentive, I really think that this message has the opportunity to either, one, speak to our hearts directly, or two, give us some wisdom that we can share with somebody else who may need to hear it. And so thank you, Duane.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate the opportunity. And I know for me, I also thought of, when I talked to Brad about this, it was important for me to think of giving our pastor a break sometimes too. So I know Derek and I have that in mind as well. So I'm glad to see everyone here this morning. You kind of gave a lot of my introduction, but I'm still going to kind of repeat some of that. So as he said, my name's Duane, and I have been with Journey Church for about 7-8 years. I'm losing track of time. And I just came in as a guitar player, and that's really where I wanted to stay. And Pastor Ken had approached me one morning and said, "Hey, have you ever led worship?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Would you ever want to?" I'm like, "No." And so anyways, he said, "Well, would you at least pray about it?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't really sing that much, I haven't sung a lot." So So I just didn't really think a whole lot of it until I got home, and then I prayed that week, and God was kind of saying something to my heart, and I'm like, well, okay. So I saw Pastor Ken the next week, and I said, maybe I'll sing you a song. Maybe I'll just do one song. We'll try that. And that one song has turned into many songs. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity from Pastor Ken and Pastor Brad. And Journey Church is really a different type of church. It reaches the communities, and that was what really attracted me to Journey Church. So definitely glad to be here and glad to share. And this is not my comfort zone. I love being behind the guitar, but I'm really glad for the opportunity. So I want to just introduce this message a little bit this morning and just give you just a little background. For me, this is a very personal message. I'm probably going to get pretty vulnerable with you. And for me, personally, I like people that are real. I like people that just are not surface people. I like people that just share their hearts, and they're just honest about things. So the past year, even until last year, I was definitely what I would call in a valley. So we're going to be talking about the valley today. And it was a long journey, it was a lonely journey, and it was a hard journey. Some of my closest friends know all about that. And I'm really thankful that I've had so many close friends and so many close people that have prayed for me through the valley. If I could give this a title, I would simply call it, God, where are you when I'm in the valley? And I surely asked that question several times through this process. There was a time, I think it was close to a year ago, that I laid down and I just kind of have a routine at night. I'll lay in bed and I'll kind of pray and, just ask, just kind of talk to God, have a conversation with God. It's nothing elaborate. It's just a conversation. And I remember praying and I said, God, I would really prefer that as I go to sleep that I won't wake up tomorrow here. And what I meant was I just wanted to wake up in heaven. I wanted to be out of this valley I was in, this darkness, the sorrow. I was ready to be in a different place. And I guess I had come to the point of maybe a bottom point in my life, and I was like, I'm ready. I don't want to do this anymore. That's exactly where I was at. And my desire was to be in heaven. I had a lot of uncertainty. I had a lot of doubts. I had anxiety. I had hopelessness, sorrow, pain, you name it. I mean, there's all the emotions. I had all of that. And that's where I was at. So, again, the reason that I wanted to talk to you about this today is because I'm preaching to myself. I'm testifying about where I was at and what I have went through and actually came through. So I can smile here because I'm through that now. But sometimes when we're going through it, it's very hard to smile. It's very hard to pray. So I want to ask you a question to begin. And what I would ask you is how many of you believe it's easy to feel God near you when you're on the mountaintop? So the mountaintop is, really the happy place. Maybe you just got a really big promotion at work. Maybe you got a big raise or a bonus. Maybe your marriage is very happy. Maybe all your relationships are just wonderful. Your relationships with your children and everything is just good. You're on the mountaintop. Maybe you're financially successful. There's no bills. Maybe you have all those paid. Maybe there's just no worries about that at all. You have freedom to give without stress. I know for me that's one of my desires is to be able just to give freely and not have any stress about, not to have any worries if I want to just hand someone a 20, someone that's in need. Maybe your health is really good and you feel physically, spiritually, and emotionally well. Maybe you have a personal goal or an accomplishment that's been a long time coming that you've hit, and that's the mountaintop experience as well. It's easy to follow God and just have your mind right when you're on the mountaintop, but it's very difficult to follow God and have your mind right when you're in the valley. One of my goals, one of my hobbies is powerlifting, and I have one of my I have a few of my favorite powerlifters here now, and one of them is my spotter, and we set goals. So I'm a goal setter. I love to set goals. And in powerlifting, there's basically 3 lifts. It's bench press. I'm saying bench press first because that's my favorite. And there's squat and there's deadlift. And for me, when I started the journey, I had a number I wanted to hit in bench press, and that was my goal. And man, did I have a lot of failures. I had that weight come down on my chest so many times, and I'm like, it's not going anywhere. And I was thankful that in those times I had a spotter. And what the spotter does, basically when it falls back on your chest and crushes you, and hopefully not falling on your throat, that person actually grabs it and pulls it up for you. And as I was thinking about this message, I was thinking about how God does that for us as well. When we sometimes feel the weight and the pressure, God is there to pull it off of us. And I'm thankful for that, because there's so many times that when we are in that situation, we feel no hope, and God is there to lift the weight off of us. So in the battle of the bench press, I finally hit my goal, and it took me so many failures to hit that goal. And when I would fail, I would kind of go into some sorrow and depression, which is kind of silly, but it is a hobby that I kind of compete at. And but when I hit the goal, I went onto the mountaintop. I was happy. Man, was I ecstatic. And many of you may not lift weights, but I'm sure you have goals. And sometimes those goals take a long time to see come to fruition. And when you do, it's a good feeling. And goals are definitely healthy. And we have purpose when we have a goal, and the feeling of accomplishment provides a season on the mountaintop. I'm not sure how to change my pages, as you can see, because I have water sitting here, I have my phone. So let me ask you this question. What happens when you find yourself in a valley? So maybe you didn't get the promotion at work. Maybe you didn't get that raise. Maybe that bonus didn't come through that you were expecting. Maybe your marriage is in trouble. Maybe you have a relationship with a child that's just it's a strain. Maybe there's a parent that you have a relationship with that's just not going very well. I know for me, I have my father. I always had a strained relationship with my father, but as he got older, he softened, and he became a man of God that I would actually admire. And here over the last 5 to 6 years, he has dementia, and he's kind of, I guess you would call it Alzheimer's. And it's very difficult, and I feel at times like I'm in a valley over this, because he's not the same father that I'm used to having. He was there for me. He was strong, and he's no longer strong. I see him more in his frailty. And it's difficult to see that as we age. And so for me, that's kind of a valley. I know it's a natural part of getting older, and we all have illnesses. So that for me has been a battle. Maybe this morning you have a child that's maybe even addicted to something. Maybe they've got in with the wrong crowd. That's a valley as well. Maybe your debt is swallowing you. You just feel like you're hopeless in your debt. You don't even want to wake up the next morning and go face the day. Maybe you've received a diagnosis of an illness that's just cripples you, that's just really shook your faith. That's also a valley situation. I want to read to you Psalms 84, 5 through 7, should be up on the screen. What that says, I want to read out of the NIV. It says, "Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage as they pass through the valley of Baca. They make it a place of springs. The autumn rains cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion." So when I read this, my first thought was, what is the valley of Baca? What does that mean? And what I found was it's likely a reference to a tree. And this tree would ooze out sap, and they called it a weeper tree. So when you saw this tree, it looked like it was crying. This is where the term the Valley of Tears came from. And oftentimes in the Bible, when you hear the term the valley, the valleys were kind of like dangerous areas. There were dangerous animals in the valley. There were dangerous people because they would kind of set up camp to try to rob others. So the valleys were very dangerous. Verse 5 says, "Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on a pilgrimage." So what I would say to you today is your current situation may be in the valley, but your mind can still be set on God. Your heart might be racing, but your mind is set. Your soul may be aching, but your mind can be set. Your emotions may be racing, but your mind is fixed toward God. Some of God's promises that I wrote is God is with you, God is for you, greater is he that is in you than he is in the world. Our God goes before us when our spirit is weak, and his word is a lamp unto our feet. Verse 6 says, "As they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs." So you may be in the valley, but you are just passing through. If I can get any message to you today, in the valley, you're just passing through it. You're not going to stay there. It's not your destination. It's not your home. Don't let it be your home. You're journeying to a place of peace. David said something similar to this in Psalm 23. He says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." You may be in the valley, but you're just passing through. You may be going through a difficult time, but you're just passing through. You may be hurting. You may be in a dark place, but you're just passing through. The road to peace is often through the valley, and you're just passing through. So, as I was going through the valley this past year, I thought to myself, what are the reasons for this? God, why do we go through these things? And as I was preparing, I thought, well, maybe it's because we're learning something. We often learn things when we're going through a valley. I think our senses are heightened when we go through pain. I think sometimes the valley experience is for refining. If you think of refining, you think of fire, and fire will refine you and kind of shape. And I also think that maybe the valley is for character, maybe character building. It's hard to really understand that sometimes when you're going through the valley, but God is building something in you, in your heart. So, verse 6 also says, "They make it a place of springs." And in the King James Version, I find it interesting that it says, "They make it a well." So, what do you do when you're in a dry season? It's dry, there's nothing, you dig a well. So, what's the purpose of the well? So the well is for you to make room for the presence of God. If you think about that. You show God your faith in him, and he will show you his faithfulness. If you dig it, he will fill it. If you pray it, God hears it. And if you plant it, he will grow it. And I was thinking about planting, and when you plant a seed. And when you read the word, there's a seed being planted in your heart. And maybe that seed isn't just for you. Maybe you're going to meet someone later that you're going to be able to share what is growing inside of your heart. Maybe in the valley, what you were going through, there's something growing inside of you that when someone else 5 years down the road goes through the same similar circumstance, you're going to be able to say, "I've been there. I understand." You put your arm around them. You provide comfort to them. You can make it through this valley. When you're in the dry place, you need to make a well and prepare for the presence of God. There's a group of us at my workplace. My workplace is kind of unique, probably more so than most places. My CEO and the owner, they're both Christian people, very strong faith, believing people. And they allow us every Tuesday morning, there's a group of us, including myself, there's 4 of us. And we're allowed to pray for 20 minutes on our shift, and we pray for our company, we pray for our employees, we pray for the nation, and whatever else we may be going on. So we meet together in this prayer setting. And last year, and even in 2016, it was very strange. Each of us, all of us, seemed to be attacked at the same time. And we've talked about this several times, and in fact, I even threatened, I think I'm just going to quit. I mean, they were going through everything before I was. I'm like, man, I'm getting out of this thing. You guys this is over the top. But so they were all going through a valley, and then I started going through my valley as well, and we all experienced this together. And I won't tell you all the situations, but the one I do want to share with you, his name is Dave, and over the past year, we've been praying mightily for this man. He's a man of honor, a man of integrity, and just when you see him at work, he's smiling all the time, and just a joyful man of God. And he was stricken with stage 4 cancer, and they found 6 tumors in his colon, and then it spread to his liver. And so they basically gave him a death sentence. And so we were kind of devastated. We've worked with him all these years now, and I guess almost 7 years for me. And we began praying for him. I remember going to our men's group over in Fremont, and I would ask for prayer for Dave, and the men's group would pray for him as well. We had employees at work praying for him. And so what I seen in Dave was, Dave dug a well. He began reading the Word, and he put out this blog on Facebook, and it was called Hope for Cancer Patients. So at first I was like, well, that's really good, and I wasn't even really giving it a lot of thought. I started reading it a little bit myself, and I'm thinking this is just going to be for people that have cancer, people that, are ill. But he began putting these daily devotions together, and as I read these, I was like, man, this is ministering to me. It wasn't all about cancer. It was about our situations. It was about our valleys. And I watched this gentleman. He went through this. And I worked on a project with him. He worked all the way up until the surgeries. And we worked on a project together, and he always had a smile. He was always joyous. He would present before our company and just, hi, everyone, just really happy. I'm thinking, how can you have that? And I knew it was the peace of God. He trusted, he had faith the entire time. He believed that God was going to do it. He just never lost faith, at least from what I saw. I'm sure he had those dark nights sometimes and all that. So anyway, the point I'm making is, and I'm going to give you the conclusion of this story with him. About a week and a half, almost 2 weeks ago, he had a liver surgery, so they wanted to remove 30% of his liver. And let me just go back. The 6 tumors in his colon, as people were praying, became 3, and then they started shrinking. And then they said, well, we need to, they went in and did like a look around, and they decided we need to take out some of your liver. And after the surgery, they said, wow, we didn't have to take out as much as we thought we would. And so that was good news. And it was a battle. He ended up having some real serious recovery issues for about a few days. And I think it was Tuesday before this Thanksgiving break, one of the guys in my group came to my desk about 4 p.m. before I left, and he said, hey, Dave's here. Would you like to come and give him a hug? And I'm like, Dave's here? Because it was like a week and a half ago, they had surgery. And I'm like, yes, of course. So I went out where he was at, and I walked in, and he made eye contact, and it was just the big smile that I'm used to. So I walked up and gave him a hug, and I said, man, you look good. His color was great. And I said, I wasn't really going to ask permission for this, but since I've seen you now, I said, I'm going to ask if it's okay if I share your testimony today, or Sunday, I said. And, he looked at me and he said, yeah, of course it's okay. And he said, I'll be praying for you Sunday. And so at that time, I didn't know the full results. And the day before, so the next day before I left for Thanksgiving break, it was close to the end of the day, I talked to one of the guys, and he said, we just got to report he is completely free of cancer. He had a death sentence, and he went through the valley, all the way through the valley, and came out the other side. And we're rejoicing in his healing because God is totally not done with him, and God's not done with you either. If you're going through the valley, you're going through it and coming out the other side. We enjoy God so much in the mountaintop, but we get to know him intimately in the valleys. God never promised that we wouldn't go through the valley, but he did promise that we wouldn't go through the valley alone. Sometimes we feel alone, but God is there, and he shows up. So with the Dave situation, I began to think, could I show the love of Christ when I'm in the valley? Is it based on my own human emotions, or is it a choice that I can make? Can happiness be a choice? Yes, it can. Could I choose to be happy in spite of my circumstances? Yes. Could I choose to believe that there is purpose in the valley? Yes. Is it hard? Yes. Remember, we're just passing through the valley. It's just temporary. I had the opportunity, I guess it was last weekend, to go through a spiritual retreat. And it was good for me. Since I'm through the valley, I could really think more clearly. And in this spiritual retreat, I kind of came out of this, I knew I needed to be more still. Psalm 46:10 reads, "Be still and know that I am God." And there's a great importance of being still. When I first got there and I got into my room, I had a room by myself, and I that first night I was sitting there and I'm trying to read the Word, and I was reading a book and kind of meditating, and I thought to myself, I don't even know if I know how to be still. There's so many things in life that distract us, our cell phones, everything, internet, TV, all that stuff. You know what I'm talking about. And I realized that, man, I need to have a time to just slow down. Our lives are fast. But I don't think God can always speak to us when we're moving so fast. We need to sometimes slow down and meditate upon him. So I realized that there was significance in slowing down. And I also realized there was a need for silence and listening. It's time for me to just be quiet and listen. Some of the most important people in my life are of very few words. But when they do speak, it's big. And, you know, some of the wisest things are just people that all of a sudden say something, and I'm like, I don't even think I get it at first. And then later I'm like, wow, I get it. Or it just hits you. I also realized that in this time that I was able to slow down some, it was a time to examine and reflect, a time to examine my own heart, where I was at. It also gave me a time to be thankful for all the good things of God. Because in spite of everything, God brought me through it, and God will bring you through it. And I'm so thankful for that. God put so many people in my life during that season, unexpected people, very unexpected people, and there was no way that I could actually explain that. And I knew that was God. It also gave me the ability to understand the valleys and their necessity. For me, the valley was a learning experience. The trial was by fire, but it refined me. It made me a different person, a better person that I actually am. I hate to say this, but I'm actually glad I went through the valley. I could not say that then, but I can say that now because it's changed me. The final statement on this, there was a statement that we actually really meditated upon a lot in our group for this spiritual retreat. And that statement was, how much of my life world is my making? How much is God's? So for me, what that meant was, Am I living in my purpose, or am I living in God's purpose? So when you're in the valley, in the dry season, you dig a well. You allow God to fill the well. You have faith and you plant the seeds. You pray and you pray some more. And you remember all the valleys are made to walk through, not stay in. God leads and guides us and is there to walk through them with us. So today I'd like to challenge you. In fact, I would just like to ask if you would mind just bowing your heads for a moment and closing your eyes and just kind of getting still for a moment. God, we just thank you for your presence. God, we thank you for your spirit. We thank you for your goodness. We thank you for your love that we feel. We just appreciate you. This morning, you may be in the valley. You may have lost hope. Maybe it's a struggle with a relationship. Maybe it's your own personal internal struggle. Whatever it is today, it's nothing new to God. God already knows. Before you even ask, He already knows what it is. Each one of us here today have had a time where we have walked through the valley. We've had seasons that have been very difficult in our lives. So we're all the same in that. And I would just challenge you today to recognize that God is there, and recognize that when you're in the valley, to reach out to Him, to pray, to reach out to others, because oftentimes when we're in the valley, we want to just close off the world. We want to hide, and we don't want to be around others. But God works through people. God's love shows through people. And I would just challenge your heart today to reach out if you're in the valley for help.